Okay, so as promised, you are tuned into Tsa Off Air live on YouTube and other socials. We'll continue our conversation with Lisa Vetten. She is a researcher. She has helped formulate important policy in our country when it comes to gender relations and legal things that affect that. But more specifically, we are talking rape, we're talking GBV in our country in light of accusations against DJ Fresh and euphonic rape accusations last week. We know that since that happened on social media, formal charges have been laid, and of course, a statement was released by their employers as well as a step down from public-facing work. But Lisa, let's continue our conversation and look at the fact that last September, the police announced 30 gender-based hotspots in the country, and they also promised that they dedicate themselves and resources to these areas. And first of all, let's talk about the methodology of identifying a hotspot. And then I always get triggered when I'm off-ramping and I see a sign that says hijacking hotspot. And I'm like, if this is indeed a hijacking hotspot, where are the darn cops patrolling and manning this hotspot? Do you know what I mean?
Exactly.
So let's talk about all of that, methodology and everything else around that.
Okay, I mean, there are two reasons why you'd want to identify a hotspot, and they're slightly different. On the one hand, you'd want to identify where there's a high volume of cases, and you might want to put specialized facilities in because you're seeing a lot of victims. So that's the way you can reach a lot of victims. The other reason you'd want to try, and this reason is different, you might want to identify a hotspot is to say, what is going on in this area where there is, why is it that this area has more rapes than other areas? But there are two different methods that you need to use to do that. So without wanting to bore your viewers, if they can just allow me a little excursion into statistics. Now, if you're wanting to just put resources to high volume of cases, then it means extra social workers, extra services, ensuring that you've got shelters, etc. Quite frankly, I think that should be everywhere. I don't know why you're only singling it out for 30 police stations out of over 1,000 police stations in the country. And when you've had, gosh, we've known this is a problem since before 1994. Exactly. So I don't know why we're only getting around to identifying the need for services in particular spaces now. So that's what you do there. But if you're trying to identify why some areas have much higher rates of rape than others, then you're using something different. Then you're pulling in researchers to analyze data and trends. You are possibly doing additional research to look at what's going on here. You might be trying to match things like increased availability of guns, increased availability of alcohol. You'd be doing different kinds of things than just providing increased services. So I think we've gone looking only at the increased services. We haven't done a very good job of that because there's a place like Thoyando that records the fifth highest number of rapes in the country. It is not recorded as a GBV hotspot. I don't understand how it fell off. So we seem to have done that, but we're not trying to seem to get to the picture of what are the underlying dynamics that might be driving violence in some areas to a much greater extent than others. And we already can see that in some parts of the country. You have, like Delft, hits highly for rape, for murder. Every single violent crime you can think of, Delft is there. So clearly we should be focusing resources there, but we're not.
So Lisa, you're speaking about statistics and research, and basically, I remember that in varsity it was per capita.
Yes.
So we need to look at the number per. See, I was there in stats class.
You were very good.
Yeah.
Wait.
So I was there. So from what I'm getting from you is that in order for the police to understand what's really going on, they would need to partner with academic institutions and actually try and get a bigger understanding of what's going on in this country.
Exactly.
Why haven't they done that?
You know, I think with rape, and in fact with crime generally, it's become way too politicized. Parties use it more with, the police are doing a good job, the police are doing a bad job, and the police use it to show their performance. That's not the purpose of statistics. Statistics are there to give you information about a problem, where things are a problem, why it's driving it, and what we do about it. And I think, unfortunately, the general public plays a role here as well, because, whenever we see the statistics go up, it's, the police are doing a terrible job. Actually, when it comes to rape, you might actually want the statistics to go up, because what you might be wanting to see is this telling us that the barriers to reporting are being removed, that more women are coming forward to report? Now, that's a research question, but we can't even answer it because our last study that looked at the rates of women not reporting to the police was done in 1997. So we really don't know what's going on in South Africa, unfortunately. So if it's going up, is it because more women are reporting? Is it because there really is a genuine increase?
And on the topic of underreporting of rape, we have heard so many horror stories of victims coming forward cases going to trial, and then for the sake of a lack of evidence or variety of other procedural issues, it's just being thrown out of court.
Yeah.
What do we do for GBV victims who have found themselves victimized over and over and over by this failing system? How do we address that?
I think it's very useful to start trying to be much more specific about where the problems are. So, I mean, that's like my disappointment with some of the law reform. One area where we could be trying to reform the law is around moving away from a much more adversarial, that very harsh cross-examination, to a system that's much more inquisitorial, where, in an adversarial system, cross-examination is your gold standard, your means of testing the truth. Inquisitorial doesn't treat cross-examination as in the same holy way. Yeah. It says there are other ways which you can get to truth.
Would we have to legislate that? How do we get to that point where we're saying it's only inquisitorial cross-examination?
We would, and the disappointment is that this question was put to the Law Reform Commission in 2002 when we were reforming sexual offences legislation. They decided not to do it. Here we are with sexual offences legislation, again before Parliament. It's not up for discussion. It's things like a sex offenders register. Well, when only 7% of rapes are resulting in convictions, why are you fussing about that 7% being put on a sex offenders register when you've got this whole 93% to be focusing on and improving on? So I think, there's too much of a tendency to want to play to what's popular. People like sex offenders registers. It sounds like you're tough on crime.
Oh, we saw it on Oprah, right?
Exactly. So. Whereas inquisitorial system, that sounds technical, that sounds legal, it sounds boring. Whereas actually, that's where we should be thinking and placing our energy. So, shows like this are good to get people thinking beyond what's popular to what requires a little more thought, but is likely to be more effective.
Wow, this is such a complex issue.
It is. You've spoken on the barriers that victims have, and we see that in this country, it's still shunned upon, and a lot of women and children suffer in silence. What sort of mechanisms can we put in place to actually remove these barriers, and so that it's easier for people who are victims of these crimes to actually report?
Well, there'd be a couple of things. The first bit, I think, would be to try and see how can we make the system less frightening, because that alone puts a lot of victims off. And when there isn't a conviction, then it reinforces the perception, oh, you lied, rather than the case that
We see it on Twitter.
Precisely. The burden is beyond reasonable doubt. It's very high. There's going to be a lack of evidence, which doesn't mean you lied. So I think it's useful to do that. I think it's also useful to help demystify the system and how it works. I think it's useful to also start identifying those officers who do a good job.
Yeah.
Because then people can see, oh, well, if I'm nice, then people say nice things about me, and then maybe you set off a chain reaction of wanting to get people to be nice.
Or if I'm effective, people will celebrate that.
Yeah. Exactly.
Or if I just do my job.
I'm
just saying.
You don't need to be a gold star.
Yeah.
Just do your job.
I'm supposed to be closing off with you. Sorry, guys. Just one last thing. How effective has it been to approach gender-based violence and rape as a public health matter, besides just a criminal matter? And I say this because we're looking at a Department of Health, sort of, I think, Soul City initiative, where they're talking about stealthing, right? Condom during sex. And people debating whether or not this constitutes rape or assault. And for me, it just seemed like such a cool way to talk about something that I think most women genuinely view as a violation.
Yeah.
But for a Department of Health to talk about it in this sense takes away all this other baggage, things like the question of he wasn't found guilty, therefore you lied. It just does something else to it to have it under another umbrella. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
I mean, the public health approach can be very useful, because I think it does try to do that.
Has it ever been done anywhere?
Oh, yes. It's becoming very much the dominant approach, I would say. My critique or concern with it is that it's taken to excess. You can start to say that things like rape are like a disease. And you can medicalize the problem. And I don't think that's really the way we want to go. I think we should also look at what are the economic dimensions of violence. That we don't think about. So I think if we think about a broader framework of reference, it's not just criminal justice system, but looks at it as a health aspect, that looks at it as an economic aspect, that looks at it, for example, if we move to domestic violence. In this country, unless you wish to have your partner arrested and prosecuted, there's no help for you. There's no attention to things like, what housing is available for you? What kind of job training schemes are available for you? What sort of childcare is there if you are stuck with your partner because you've got no job, you don't know where to take your children, etc. So if we try to think of it as a multifaceted problem, that would mean all the departments of government would have to get on board, rather than just looking at justice, the police and the Department of Social Development and saying, not my problem, you do something about it.
Yeah. Lisa Vetten, thank you so much for your time this evening. Always a pleasure, and I think what's so important about the work that you do is you come on here and you break down complex issues into I guess even a soundbite that we can understand and then relay to our friends and our family, etc. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, that's been another edition of Tsa Off Air. I really, really hope this has helped you at home. We'll check you out next time.